Okay, why don't I just start now, because it is top of the hour and I think we're good so far. I'm on my phone now, so hopefully that will work with the internet connection. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our Frankfurt meetup, where only one of the people here is actually in Frankfurt. Anyhow, I'm really glad that you all joined, and we will be back with in-person meetups soon. So if you live in a place with an active cloud native community and you would like us to run a meetup in your city, or you want to run a meetup with any of us, then hit us up. Specifically, you can reach out to Ashish, who is our community and events manager, or you can contact me. I'm Lian. I'm a developer advocate with Loft Labs. And yeah, we will just see what we can do and yeah, make it happen. So the best way to reach out to us is on our community Slack. You can find that on slack.loft.sh or on any kind of social media that you like. Well, not any kind, because we're not on TikTok or Instagram, I guess, so not those. LinkedIn and Twitter will be probably the best ways to reach us. So I'm supposed to do a little bit of an intro. I don't think I can fill 10 minutes, but what I can say is that we are going to be talking about our latest open source project, which is called DevPod. And DevPod was released almost exactly to the day, I think, 4 months ago. And we have gotten a lot of positive feedback from the community, which is amazing. And yeah, I want to hereby also just thank everyone again who contributed, providers, or opened an issue or pull request or talked about DevPod, maybe on stage or just with their colleagues. Thank you so much. That was really great to hear how you all are working with it and how it's making your lives easier. So that's what we're going to talk about mostly. And, one of the people who took the opportunity and created a custom provider for Scaleway in, I don't know, what was it, like a day, something like that, like a day after it was released or something, is our good friend Engin, who's here with us today. So Engin is a customer experience architect at Pulumi. And as such, probably often has to run, workshops with customers. And he says himself that it's been quite the struggle before DevPod came along. Yeah, so I am quite excited to hear your experiences. And also you're going to tell us about how to avoid common pitfalls. So Engin, are you ready to go? I know we're like a little bit early, but hopefully you're prepared.
Then more time for the panel discussion. Thanks again for inviting me and the opportunity to share, some of the experience we made with DevPod. So let me share my slides. Wait, I have to share my screen before. Okay, and let's start. Okay, so the idea or the topic was, okay, how we boost our customer workshop efficiency through DevPod. As you can guess, and shortly to myself, yes, my name is Engin Diri. I'm working at Pulumi as a customer experience architect, which is part of the professional service team. We come later to this because that's why we discovered DevPod and used DevPod. I'm very keen on all the things about cloud and cloud transformation, enablement, and so on and so on. And the whole continuous law is something I really like. Underneath there are my socials. Feel free to follow me for low quality content. Before we start, let me give you some my tips for a successful workshop. These are some things I discovered. Again, I'm not maybe a perfect person who knows all the ups of a workshop and all the paradigms behind this. This is now really feedback I have from the field. I started in this role officially last year. Before, in my former company, we did also workshop trainings, but this is inside the company. You can be less organized if you do it inside the company. The people are more forgiving. But here in this case, when we have paying customers, they expect, of course, the best output for workshops, trainings, especially when they dedicate time. And sometimes you have courses. And I also wanted to drop this old school meme template because I think Success Kit is not used anymore that much. So for me, that's a thing. Okay, so what is my points for running a successful customer workshop, customer training? So I see I activated on my slides the automatic, what is it called? The automatic advancing. So just a second, I want that it's doing manually. So, okay. So one of the points I found very, very helpful and very important was that I know our participants. So I work closely, for example, with our customer success managers. These are the persons who are very close with the customers, know most of the time what the customer is up to, and they are also the persons who's organizing the workshop. It can sometimes it's also be part of a sales agreement that they say, okay, part of the enterprise agreement is also to get regular workshops. So that means the team, us, are sometimes called, hey, there is a workshop next week or in whatever time frame, and then I have to know who are the participants, to who we are talking. Is it now a developer? Is it now C-level persons? So there are different audiences, and one of the key things I always like beforehand is know more about the participants. Very important also for me was always define a clear idea of a goal. So what we're going to train. So sometimes it's just like, yeah, we would like have some basic course about Pulumi, for example. So in this case, I like to go into discussion again, either with the customer success manager to ask him, hey, could you ask the customer specifically what we're trying to achieve, or when they are also in our Slack channels, or some of the business critical customers, for example, they get a dedicated Slack channel. So I can also reach out to the customer and ask him, hey, what is the goal? What are you trying to achieve? What do you want to learn? So point number 2, define the clear goal of the workshop. I always found also out that I should always have some backup content, because sometimes the audience is very, very busy, very good with the subject already, and then I'm maybe too quick finished. The training is too already done, and then they look at you. So I always like to have some additional content ready. I call them, I or everybody call them stretch goals, to say, okay, let's add additional stuff. So what I did the last time is to say, hey, can you deploy an ingress, for example, or can you deploy in terms of Kubernetes, for example, a pod disruption budget. So people have to look this up and can then also do this on their own and try again to apply the learnings on their own. And this is something I always have what I found very suitable. It's like in school time. I was also one of the people in school who was always finished with the assignments, and then I idled around or walked through the room and so on. And yeah, then you had some teachers who had some additional, so it was always then make task number 5C, and this was the most difficult mathematics stuff. So I think it's stolen from there. Now we come to the point why I'm here invited. So brace yourself for the unexpected. So that's something everybody knows, that I know that DevRels pray to the demo gods, and everybody has this thing where they say, okay, there can something happens. Same applies for the workshop. Everything. What can go wrong will go wrong. And I again put here an emphasis on this, because this is the thing, the unexpected, and that happened quite a lot. So during the workshop, there's also some points I like to follow is here. So set the scene. If it's an on-person workshop, I recently did in Austria, for example, I like to come a little bit earlier, because you never know how is the technique, how is the room. You need to get a little bit familiarized with the scene. And now comes the most trivial thing. Did I brought my USB-C adapter with me? Because that's the thing to get connected. So I'm very happy that my MacBook has an HDMI connector. So I'm most of the time safe to connect at least the screen, but then my clicker or whatever has to be, because it's all USB. So I like to investigate the scene. A proper check-in, yes, that should be always the case, to say, okay, who's present, what's going on. So being aware who's all who attended the workshop. I mean, people signing in, people arriving, for example. If it's a workshop for the whole community, for example, I just ask around to understand the people, because maybe they signed through Meetup, so I did not have the chance maybe beforehand to work with the customer success manager here. So a proper check-in always helps to get a better understanding. What's always important, and this is something I learned also from conferences, and Lian had also some amazing talks about this, setting the ground rules and going beyond this. So it's not only about, okay, when do we start and so on, but also setting some rules. In a conference, we would say the code of conduct, but also in a workshop to say, okay, hey, we are not rude to each other. You can make mistakes and so on, you know, please ask, it's a safe space and so on. Because sometimes when you're inside a company, people are a little bit shy to ask, you know, they pretend that they know it, or you ask around, you're like, hey, does everybody understood this? You are there. And I always say to them, I said, hey, I'm here for you, not for myself. So if you have a question, but again, it's very difficult here in this case. And I like always to set up some of the rules and say, okay, everybody is same, and no shaming and no having to fear, but that's not always working, especially in a company context. On a community workshop, for example, it's a little bit easier, but here I try to take care that, for example, quieter persons or persons from underrepresented groups are not going in the second row, and only one person keeps on asking stuff and so on. So that's also a thing. Expectations and agenda, that's also very important. So I like to put an agenda out to say, okay, these are the topics we're going to tackle, adding, for example, also a break into this, so people know, okay, that's the timeline, similar to school. I mean, this is completely stolen from my school time. And also setting, okay, what you will learn during this. So again, this is the expectations, so people are fully aware of this. And now comes the most important thing, an icebreaker. So trying to get as quickly as possible to bond or gain the trust of the people there. So I try always to adapting the situation to make a joke or call some anecdote. So for example, when I was in Austria, I talked about how I went through the city and saw the famous church there and so on. So getting people a little bit, how do you say this? More cool, you know, and not being like, oh, it's a training or it's a workshop and so on. With customers, it's the same. It's I am in a good situation with Pulumi, for example. We have a wide variety of customers. So some people in finance, some people in machines and so on. So there's always a thing you can ask about. And at the end, most of the people are developers. So developer jokes or ranting about your laptop is always working. Or for example, when your Zoom call is not working, that's always something to talk about. And again, after the workshop, so it doesn't stop like this, because we have also, especially when it's a customer, we have to see that we also do some housekeeping and after work. So engaging with the participants, telling them how they can reach, for example, how they can, if they're not finished with some of the tasks, how they can still ask for help. So taking care of this, that people are aware that they can reach out or can ask me still questions or whatever. We don't have any certification currently or any badging process or anything like this. So in this case, it's really like giving the customers some engagement feedback. And most importantly is also for myself is to say, okay, give me feedback. I mean, that's very important because as you may noticed, or I mentioned also, I'm not doing this for a living. I don't have a teacher background or something like this. So I'm an engineer who tries to share the knowledge with other engineers. And there's always situations where I may have missed something or did wrong. Okay. Now you saw in the slide, I color highlighted the brace yourself for the unexpected part. And this is now the part why I'm here. Otherwise, it would have been a normal talk. So I put here this picture. My code doesn't always work, but when it does, it works on my machine. And now comes the big update. This applies to workshops also. So when I create a workshop in an area of Pulumi, for example, where we code stuff, where code is our main law and our main selling point and so on, it will break definitely. And it worked on my setup. And I had this so often that I created a workshop. Everything went chef's kiss. We go to the customer, we went there, and then you discover it don't work. So the worst one, I was really on one workshop so much pissed off. Now we get demonetized because I spent so much energy into this workshop, and then I think 80% of the people could not finish over the second topic, and that was enormous frustrating, and was my turning point to say, okay, we need to change this. So what are the unexpected? What is things I saw? So for example, different operating systems. I cannot tell you, when there's no rule in the company for one specific client or whatever, people go mental. I mean, really mental. I saw setups, operating systems, some kind of Linux. That's something really crazy what's going on there. But then again, Microsoft, you have different Microsoft versions, you have Mac and so on. So different operating systems are really a nightmare to handle. Then comes the next point, which goes here to our larger enterprise customers, security and compliant on managed clients. This is also a nightmare. So you go there and you say, hey, can you install please X? I mean, it doesn't work. I mean, it's not about they cannot click on the X. It's just either they are not reaching GitHub, some banal stuff. And I'm always asking them, how do you work? I mean, literally, how do you work? And also, when they are managing it via file share, you know, and you make this 15 minutes copy actions, I downloaded, he downloaded, and then it will be shared. Some people don't have the rule on their Windows machine to execute an exe. So they have to call the service desk, who then dials in and clicks on the exe and enter the password. So time wasters, or how do we call it, time eaters without an end. And again, it's crazy. Different programming language to support. This is also something. So we at Pulumi support Python, TypeScript, JavaScript, did I say .NET and Go, for example. So then you can imagine all the different SDKs and so on. So you ask the people like, hey, I'm going to do this in TypeScript. Do you have TypeScript installed? Yes, of course we have TypeScript. You come there and you see it's a different version. You never tested it before. It doesn't work. And we're not talking now about NPM install and this stuff, which doesn't work again. So that's very, very complicated, but it doesn't end like this. So the next point is that the different Pulumi versions. You ask the customers, hey, which Pulumi CLI version do you have installed? Yeah, we have Pulumi installed and so on. So you prepare yourself, because I'm latest is greatest person. So I have always the latest version bruised. And then you go there and you find out they have a really outdated version where this specific feature you want to work on is not working. Again, nightmare. Especially at customers who have their own package system, because some of the people, they package stuff and deliver them also through their internal stuff. And now you can imagine how to get the stuff on board. Additional CLIs, we work with cloud providers, for example. So without an AZ or AWS or G Cloud stuff, you're sometimes really lost. So having additional CLIs is also a thing. And because you maybe want to prove something, you want to show people, hey, do AWS get buckets, for example, to see that the bucket is created. Yes, I don't have AWS installed. And last but not least, the IDE versions. So again, I met person who use Emacs, Vim, you name it, and these are the hardcore persons. And then we go up to IntelliJ, whatever, Golang, everything is there, and there are different IDE versions with different setups again. So this is also killing you massively. So yeah, yeah, Go workshop. That's a thing. And now we opened the problem space. Now we see how miserable my life can be. So there's like, okay, what is a solution? So of course we looked around and said, okay, what are the possibilities? Yes, there are some systems out of the market, but why did we like DevPod? So when DevPod came out, why it was such a success for us, and we keep on continuing to roll this out. And this is also one of the things we say when we do our workshop, hey, we're going to use DevPod. So it's built on the development container spec or the dev container spec. This is very, very useful. Underneath, you have the dev container JSON. And here comes now one benefit of this. If I create a dev container JSON, which is a standard, maybe there's a person who says, hey, I want to use code space. Yeah, you can use this. Or they say, hey, I want to run it in my VS Code and so on. Yes, you can run this. So I'm not locked into something. And this makes it really, really nice. Yes, you lose DevPod benefits we talk later on. But again, this thing is now more portable. So when I leave and they want to recreate this, and maybe I brought then the AWS keys with me, they provisioned a virtual machine on there, they can still work on this, still clone, and maybe they install DevPod on their own for their private stuff or for their own cloud, so they can work with this. That's completely fine. So that's a huge benefit. With the dev container, with the dev container specification comes also the custom Docker file support. I like this also very much. So I can just create a Docker file with the Docker file DSL, so people can maybe reuse this also. I can amend this, I can update it. So that's very powerful to add. Then all the additional, we talked about missing CLIs and this stuff. So I can add all the missing pieces to this. I can even choose which from I would like to use. So that's very, very useful. If I don't have anything, that's also a good part with the dev container spec. It assumes something. So it will give me, depending on what language he detects inside, he will spawn up the right container image. But again, for us in Pulumi, we need also some additional stuff. So I don't want to talk people about do a sudo apt install or something like this. That's again killing then the session. Choose your own cloud environment. Now we come to the perks of DevPod. Is then I'm relatively free here with what we're going to use. So when the customer has, for example, a development subscription with Azure, they can use, for example, this cloud provider. I have now in October something planned with a customer. They're going to use Exascale. So I will create an Exascale provider and also give it to them, because we want to do the workshop in Exascale. We get cloud credits from them for free. And that would be awesome when I arrived there, that we also have the Exascale provider ready, and then they have the full experience with the cloud provider. I like also the approach of DevPod that it's IDE agnostic. I hope that's a word in your marketing, because I just invented it, to say, okay, I can choose from a wide selection of different IDEs, be it local, or remote or on the browser, what I would like to use. So for example, I like to use IntelliJ, which is a little bit pain with the gateway stuff, but sometimes VS Code is much, much quicker. So that's very fine. And as a last backup, which also helps, as you mentioned, see before with the different installations and so on, because you never know if the IDE which is installed is compatible with the DevPod. VS Code as a browser support. This is also very, very cool, a cool functionality. Yeah, how does it look like? So here, this is, for example, my running instance. So I have my Scaleway, because there I have my Scaleway instance up and running. The Equinix one, which is a bare metal provider, or bare metal as a service. This is something also installed, but I don't use it that much because it's cost a little bit more on this side. So I did not have any project where I need the full power of Equinix, because yeah, Scaleway is doing also very good. So this, for example, is the production ready Kubernetes workshop, for example. I will show this also as part of the demo, which is publicly available. This was one of our public workshops, and it's completely on DevPod. But DevPod for me And now comes also the buy-in I made on my side is also, it's beyond workshops. We talk with our internal engineering, for example. So we use it also, for example, to create our provider. So most of the providers I create or I maintain, or together with here with Pod Labs, for example, there's always a dev container JSON inside, and I use DevPod heavily on this side. Also for working here with the provider generation. We also talked with the engineering at Pulumi, and the engineering found DevPod also very, very interesting, and they're working also on onboarding. So for them, now we come to the classical parts, which maybe now differ from me as a using part. It's the stuff to get quicker onboarding and so on. But I think you may already know this, or you can watch some YouTube videos, or maybe the nice folks of Loft will tell more about this. I will show you this quickly in action, and then I also will wrap this up. So then let me share. So this is here my production ready Kubernetes workshop. As you can see, the dev container is inside the Docker file, for example. So I use the base image from Pulumi, taking care with a depender-pod that it gets automatically updated also to the latest version of our Pulumi image. That's very, very useful. And then you can see I install the CLI and everything else which is needed. It is the CLI from Scaleway gets installed, Flux gets installed, because the workshop is partly also Flux related. And when we go back, you have the possibility to just click here the open in DevPod action I inserted in our README, and then I can go to my DevPod, automatically launch this one, and it should take some time, because that's also a benefit of DevPod. It puts my virtual machine to sleep. So I'm not taking care of this. When I'm not using it, it will just suspend this one. So I'm not here having running, this joke that you forgot an VM in AWS and now you are bankrupt or something like this. So it will put this in hibernation. So it takes a little, some seconds to get it up and running. It's quicker when you do it. I mean, this is now a fresh install, so it will download some additional stuff and will create also here the Docker image. Oh, no, I already installed it once. Perfect. And now you can see here how the story goes. So I created here markdown files so the people can go to the app setup, for example. And let me see this in better. No, that's splitting. You see, I'm more IntelliJ user. Where is the render stuff? Okay, doesn't matter. And I can just go then to my instruction. So we go to the C01 app, and then I can say npm install. And hey, npm is installed. It's already there, and I can just continue to work. And let me see that Pulumi is also installed. So we'll say Pulumi version. Yes, it's also there. And when I say Pulumi up, because now I want to deploy the stuff, it will ask me here some stuff like enter your access token, or what I always do is when some external, then the community works and they're like, oh, I don't want to create an account at Pulumi Cloud, even when it's for free. I just have also the Pulumi local one, and then you can do blah, and then it starts the Pulumi stuff. So that's completely fine. Yes, of course, I missed the secret piece. Okay, that's this part. And yes, I can stop this. I do this later. Let me wrap up. So we saw a little demo. Okay, little wrap up from my side. DevPod is awesome and versatile. I don't need to talk about this. You saw this. I mean, if you did not see now the advantages of having built on an open source specification and having here this freedom and the way to handle, you should definitely check this out. For me, it becomes an integral or a basic building block for successful Pulumi trainings and workshops. So that's something very important. And even beyond this, and now we come to my little wish list, because I want to use the opportunity with the Loft people to also stuff some agenda on it, to say, okay, it would be awesome, and maybe it's already in place, I'm just not aware of this, to share a provider with all participants without sharing credentials. So in terms of a central thing, me as a teacher, I have a central running, and I have the AWS, I bring it, and I don't need the people, so they could just spin up their own VM or whatever, something like this. OIDC support for authentication could be nice, so I don't need to share at all some kind of credentials when connecting to the cloud provider, for example. And now I would honestly love it when there's a lab module inbuilt, so I could drop in my markdown in a specific format or something like this. DevPod picks it up, and when he comes up with the VS Code online stuff, you have on the left side also maybe the markdown nicely rendered. So that could be a cool feature. Again, it's just a wish list. I don't know how. I'm a solutions architect, not a dev. Don't know how, if it's easy or not to do this stuff. I just dropped now some wish lists out. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yay, thanks, Engin. That was great. Thank you so much. Okay, I have some questions, but I also want to say, if you have any questions for Engin, please drop them into the YouTube chat, or if you're here on the Zoom, drop them into our Zoom chat. And also, can you share any of the things that you've just shown us? Are those openly available?
Yes, of course. I mean, the one workshop, I mean, the internal ones are not available, but here, because the customer are paying for this, but I can share in the group chat the one of the Pulumi production ready Kubernetes workshop, where you have in 5 steps, 5 chapters, you have different topics to tackle. And I'm currently working on a secret one for getting some Dapper stuff up and running on Pulumi.
Oh, some secret stuff. Okay, so we'll have to follow you on social media to hear about your secret stuff. Awesome. So how long did it take you to set up DevPod for your customer workshops?
I mean, there's just one thing. That's the reason I have it on the wish list. You still have to be sure that they can install DevPod. So that's the only thing. So that's why I rely on the devcontainer JSON. If there's the case and we could not get it up and running with DevPod, they can still switch, for example, to the online version of some of your competitor products to still follow along this. But the thing is, we don't want to go anymore without this. So whatever we have, be it VS Code locally or whatever system, we need to get the people that they use the devcontainer JSON. So that's a thing to ask beforehand and take care that they can. So as I said before, some companies, it's very easy. So it goes very quick, and then you just give the credentials API token of the cloud provider they want to use, or I bring it with me. But yeah, that's the only thing. So
yeah, they're using their own machines, so you have to kind of make sure that that's makes sense. And I think we can mention that one of our competitors' products, and it's actually, I don't even know if it's fair to call it competitors, but more like synergies, is GitHub Codespaces. And I think that probably can be a good thing, that you can use the same devcontainer JSON for both.
Yeah.
But then you're kind of tied into where they're running the dev containers. So what are the providers or environments that you usually use, that you usually have experience with for the custom workshops? Is that local? Is it remote?
I mean, what we have is remote. Mostly it's going on remote, and that's the thing. For example, here in this case with the Scaleway, we're going to do the Exoscale AWS. I did not try the Kubernetes one, so not sure how this is going. Yeah, because the VM stuff is just better, and the machines, when you really get a good machine, they are better connected, and sometimes the cloud provider have also an internal proxy of NPM package and so on, so you get much quicker the stuff than you would get it over the air through your whatever place you are. So that's amazing how quick, when I do a Go build, for example, or a Go mod tidy, how quick the Go modules are down. When I do this locally on my machine, it's really detectable slower. I mean, it's really, you feel it. It's not just like, yeah, you are picky, you're an engineer, whatever. No, it's really slower.
No, that's great to hear. Actually, that's awesome. Fabian, you looked like you wanted to ask something, but maybe.
Yeah. I wanted to give you the first questions essentially, and then.
No, I'm good. You can ask ahead.
Yeah, but like, thanks so much, Engin. That was like a really great presentation. Like, yeah, I'm in awe how cool you've put that. And I didn't even know about like what you're doing already with DevPod. So that is like pretty cool to see. And I'm glad that it's a good solution, good fit for you.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. Yeah, I'm like, for example, like one thing we also thought about is to actually create like some sort of Pulumi provider where you can point essentially essentially with like a provider option it to like a Pulumi repository, downloads Pulumi, and then essentially executes that. So that might be, I'm not sure if like that is also something you might be interested in to collaborate on, or if you have ever thought about something like this.
I checked it. I checked it also with the Terraform provider, and I saw that there was still the thing that start-stop was not able with the as far as
like the Terraform provider is, I would say, still a work in progress, and also since they changed like their licensing model now, I probably don't think it would affect us, but still, Pulumi is probably a better bet right now than announcing a Terraform provider. But anyways, like I just thought like this is maybe an interesting thing eventually.
Definitely.
But I also have like another question. So like these workshops, they are like most like, so I saw you like use Flux and so on. Are they like also Kubernetes related, or is it mostly Pulumi and spinning up infrastructure with
it's really everything. That's the thing with the expectations. So some customers would like to learn Pulumi specifica, like what is a component resource, how to create abstractions inside Pulumi. But sometimes it's also like, hey, how to interact with AWS, for example. So then you can up with some cases. Or in this case, for example, with the Kubernetes one, just to show the people also, hey, Pulumi is not also spinning up your Kubernetes, the Kubernetes instance, but also is able to deploy in it. So you have, you can use, for example, the ignition of Flux using not the CLI, maybe just to say, okay, do a Helm install of the Flux and then you can continue with your GitOps approach, but you just started the stuff, or you need to create a secret. You don't want to do some sealed secret, whatever approach. You say, okay, I use the secret provider of Pulumi, create a secret resource in Kubernetes. So yeah, this is also important. So it doesn't stop with hardware, with cloud resources. It also goes to provisioning parts.
That's cool. That's interesting. And the customer is defining essentially what they would like to deploy. So this essentially shapes then the workshop because they give like the input. Hey, we would like to see Exascale. We would like to see Scalewhale, AWS.
Yeah. And then I tried to get a story around. So for a short time, I also created Minecraft deployments of a Minecraft server, just to show, okay, they are like, hey, how to do in Python a custom component. So I created the Minecraft component with all the VPC stuff inside, and you have a funny thing. So I spin up my Minecraft client and then just show how I connect to the public IP of the Minecraft server. That's also something. And then telling the story to say, look, when you have now this abstraction, you can create 10 times. You can create your Minecraft hosting service on the company cloud. What is better than running your underground Minecraft hosting service?
That's nice. Really cool.
Definitely see some potential for people secretly deploying some kind of Bitcoin mining containers.
Why is our AWS bill so high? I don't know. This is it's Kubernetes. Yeah, cool. No, very nice. I really, really liked the talk. That was really great. Yeah, and I definitely noted down all your recommendations. or like wish list essentially. I made a screenshot of that, so we'll definitely take a look there on what we can do. And I think the first point is very doable there. OIDC provider, we'll see, but yeah, this is definitely something we can work on.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Do we
And yeah,
have
also thanks again for all the contributions. You were like contributing providers and like are engaged in the community there. That is really, really cool to see. So thanks a lot for doing that.
I wanted to provide, before the Hetzner one gets provided from somebody else, I worked on it's still in my Git repository, on a Rust version of it.
Ooh.
But the SSH stuff is not good on Rust as it is on Go. So I was not able to get this continuous back and forth running. So I get the ping, but and then it's not the Rust Go SSH library was not that good to get it working.
Maybe you could even call out to the SSH CLI just, and then let the SSH CLI on the operating system do the SSH work.
And then it lost. I mean, yeah, I saw this also as a suggestion from other persons, but then hey, it's Rust, and then you lose completely. I did not understood at the end, so that's the only part. So I could create the binary, everything worked fine. He created the instance, that was all fine. But the constant communication did not work. So then, again, but the Go version is up and running, and that's all good. And maybe in half a year, there is a person created a good crate about SSH.
Yeah. That's still great to see, though. Yeah, cool.
Awesome. All right. I don't think we have any more questions. Does anyone here still want to ask Engin something? Okay, probably not. I have a final question for you, Engin. Do you want to stick around and join us for the panel discussion? Do you have time to do that?
I have unfortunately to drop out for the next session now because my American colleagues are waking slowly. So I also need to start Slack again because I didn't want that during the thing some Slack messages come up. So that's the thing. I should now see what's going on in Pacific time.
Smart. Okay, thank you so much, Engin, for this amazing talk and for sharing, all the insights and for giving us something to think about for a roadmap. It's great.
Yeah.
And for the providers, of course.
But I will slowly log out, so I will be there at the beginning, so no problem on this.
Cool. All right. So we will take like a 5-minute break. So everyone can quickly go to the bathroom and grab some drinks, and we will be back in 47, if my clock is right. Okay, we're going to take 5 minutes. See you in a moment.
All right.
All right, I am back. How about everyone else? Yes, I see faces coming back on. Awesome. Cool. Right, so we will start now with our panel discussion on self-service infrastructure and the modern developer. So let's just introduce ourselves real quick. Again, my name is Lian. I'm a developer advocate here at Loft, and I will be hosting. Fabian, how about you introduce yourself next?
Hey everyone, I'm Fabian. I'm here CTO and co-founder at Loft Labs. Also helped with creating DevPod and other open source projects we have, such as vCluster. Pretty happy to be here. And with me is Thomas.
Yes, hi, I'm Thomas. I'm a senior software engineer here at Loft, and I've been mostly focused on both vCluster and Loft and all the projects related, and improving them and making them more efficient as is.
Even more efficient.
Even more
Awesome.
efficient.
I also like how Fabian said, I helped develop DevPod when really he just locked himself in a room for like 2 months and then out came a new project.
Didn't want to say it like that, yeah.
Oh no, in this specific case, you can say that because I think just to make clear that you're the DevPod person, like you know what's up. You've been inside and out multiple times. So yeah, we will be talking about many things today, not necessarily only about DevPod, but also about self-service infrastructure and how to empower developers going into the future. What will the future hold for the idea of DevOps and platforms. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meetup, DevPod was really successful. It's only been 4 months, but already we've gotten so much positive feedback and seeing like customers, like not customers, but users like Engin using it in really cool ways. So my question to you, Fabian, since you started it more or less, is that something that surprised you, or did you always know that DevPod was going to be a hit?
I mean, when we had the idea, so I mean, we come from like an engineering background. We've also launched DevSpace, which is now a CNCF project, and we already like knew there was like a gap to fill, because we see all these like hosted development environments offering like GitHub Codespaces, Gitpod, and there are many others. And but what's kind of missing is essentially a tool that really spins up your developer environment in a like client-only fashion, because all these services and all these offerings, they're like hosted, subscription-based. Yes, they often have like a free model, but it's difficult to actually spin them up anywhere with your favorite IDE. And that's essentially what we try to do with DevPod. So when we had the idea and when we thought about this and when we actually started developing it, we knew there was like a gap, but we didn't kind of expect like so many people being actually really hyped about it. And I mean, we were like Hacker News on the first page, and there was like a lot of people that said a lot of good things about DevPod. So I'm pretty amazed also about like what Engin is doing there at Pulumi. So we see more and more people using it and asking questions, writing providers. So it's really cool to see all this engagement from the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were also not prepared that Engin would actually write a provider within the first day of release. That was really amazing.
Crazy, yeah.
And also, like, how many providers, like community providers, do we have now?
Oh, I think it's around like 7 or 8. So it's pretty good already. So we have like covered all the or most of the bigger cloud vendors. So obviously we've created like an AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure provider ourselves, but there's like so many more, like Engin said, there's Exoscale, there's Hetzner, there's essentially you name it, there is a provider now. So that is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm wondering, So when I started becoming an engineer, like DevOps was something that we were all told to do, like you build it, you run it. That was kind of the idea. But I feel like the development is going back to like old times, where it's moving away from DevOps, since we're starting to separate development and ops, like platforms, SRE again. So Thomas, what do you think about this? Do you think this is a good thing to do?
Well, so I mean, initially when you look at DevOps, the entire thing of DevOps was just forced. It wasn't developers that said we want to do operations now. It was basically a manager who told you, look, we're doing DevOps now. It's mind shift change and good luck, have fun, basically. And oftentimes when you're just a developer, you want to do the things that you like, that you're good at, which is developing things. And the thing about you build it, you run it, isn't necessarily that you need to know every in and out of a platform or some other tool. It's basically that you take responsibility for it. And I think that's where we're getting to right now, because it's not so much that you need to know every single field in a deployment spec of Kubernetes. It's more of that so that you know when I run it on Kubernetes, this is how I can debug it if it doesn't work. So we're seeing, I mean, this change now of being like, we're not DevOps anymore, and not everybody's going to run their own Elasticsearch or Loki or some other log analysis, but just saying, hey, let's just everyone combine it. Let's just not waste time on the same task and just combine it into a platform team and then get back on with our life as developers.
Yeah, makes sense. Fabian, have any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I think like also the developer role itself has changed a little bit and is now changing back. So like Thomas said, it's not necessarily something the developer wanted to do ops, but through tooling like Docker, kind of ops was made easier in terms of that developers can do Docker. And then people were thinking, hey, if you can do Docker, you probably can do Kubernetes. But then there was like kind of this roadblock where Kubernetes actually isn't made for developers. It's actually made for ops people. So this, I think, also made developers really struggle with that new definition of what they had to do, which also like is the reason why we now see a lot of developer tooling in the Kubernetes space. But I still think now we are kind of seeing also more endeavors to make developer a pure developer again and kind of help them through either abstractions or toolings to focus more on the actual developer role.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I remember that when I was like doing DevOps or like being on call, it was always about, okay, something's broken. No one knows what to fix or how to fix it or like what's broken. Like there's a very, very reduced set of things that an ops person can actually fix, you know? So it was always like, okay, do I call the engineer now? Probably not. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, I totally agree with you that was more for the benefit of ops than for devs probably. So if we're gonna move back to separating dev and ops, how do we make sure that we're not having this wall? It's called wall of confusion. I think that's what we used to call the wall between dev and ops, where you just throw stuff over the wall and then hope that something sticks. So how do we make sure we're not repeating the same mistakes again? Anyone can take this. I don't care.
I don't know. Like I think we've learned a couple of things now. So for example, we need to make sure that we don't like extend the development role into areas where people are actually not trained in. So there is like this expectation for a developer to always learn, which is good. But I feel like also most developers have like specific interests, and from what I've heard, ops is not necessarily always of interest for a developer. So I think what we can learn from this is actually to listen to developers and actually hear what they have to say. So what like the interests are, like in what areas they want to go. and then you relatively clearly see where the direction should go, like what tools they are liking, what tools they like to work with, what abstractions they like to use. And this is also different, obviously, for every developer. But I think, yeah, what has happened a little bit in the past is like the direction. As a developer, you need to do this, you need to know this, which is probably not something we should do moving forward. It's more about like, hey, you have knowledge in specific areas, and then there's tooling that helps you to fill in the gaps that you might need. Also with like new advancements in the AI space, GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT, that can help you already with a lot of tasks you maybe have problems with.
Yeah, adding to that,
yeah.
I also see the shift in, let's say, goals or desires, if you want to call it like that. Because back when starting with cloud and with everything, people got used to managed services. When you go to GCP, to AWS, you just spin up a database, you don't think about it as a developer. If something doesn't work, you just ring up that cloud provider. And that's great from like a developer perspective. There are things that you just don't have to care about that you can give away to some platform operator, like a cloud provider, but you pay a high price for that, or higher price than for the actual hardware and software that you're running, because they have a service fee. So you oftentimes see the shift back where enterprises right now just say, look, we don't want to go into the cloud anymore. It's cheaper for us to just buy the hardware, put it in a data center, and run it ourselves. But it's missing this crucial part where if you look at AWS, everything they do is software defined. If you do VPC and networking, it's software defined networking where user creates a VPC, creates a network, and just does that there. But it is hardware accelerated. So you always have this thing where this platform provider that you have has some interconnection between the hardware that they buy and the software that they offer. And a lot of enterprises now are basically trying to recreate that, where they say, we just buy the software, we spin up a couple of VMs, and then we just run those things that exist. Or we create a massive Kubernetes cluster, we put Minio or Rook and Ceph and have object storage, and then can have operators that create databases for us. So what basically is happening now is that you have got those platform teams that are basically creating, let's say, internal clouds, which are then providing services to developers so that developers can transfer the knowledge that they already have and the experience from using a cloud to an internal provider, internal platform, which reduces costs and hopefully keeps specific expertise for specific applications without putting that burden onto developers or certain teams that don't necessarily have to be super educated in that area.
Do you see yourselves as engineers or ops people?
Definitely more engineer than ops. I mean, now I've kind of grown a little bit into both, I guess, unwillingly in some areas. But yeah, I still consider myself more like a developer than an ops person, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I was a developer first, then I got into ops, and now I'm back into software engineering. So it's you see the both things, and at some point it's just intertwined. There's not necessarily a strict line between the one thing and the other. You gain the experience of one thing, you fix the other. It's like in soccer. If you know how to defend, you probably know how to shoot a goal because you know what you have to do in order to achieve that other thing. So you just get better at both things.
Yeah, and I guess I think the big learning for me was really understanding what happens before and after your job, right? Like that's just, even if you don't have to develop, it would still be helpful to understand, what they're dealing with and why people do things the way that they do. Because, once you start talking with people, with your colleagues, turns out they're actually not intentionally making your life harder. Surprisingly so. I don't know. Maybe they are. I don't know. We have some colleagues here on the call, but they're not showing their faces, so I'm sure they know that we mean them specifically. Yeah. So you mentioned also Thomas. You mentioned that it's transferring knowledge. So you can transfer knowledge that you have from cloud providers to internal platforms. Did I get that correctly? Right. So are you saying that we should develop platforms that resemble cloud providers?
Well, here's the thing. A cloud provider pattern, as is, be it Google, GCP, Azure, Equinix, Metal, any of the big providers, those models work. And over the years, it has shown that not only as business models, but also as operational models. So it's not necessarily a question if you should replicate it and do it one by one, but it's a thing of if you're trying to do something similar, this is like a blueprint that could work out if you do it right, and if you hire the right people, if you have the right experience. Because at the end of the day, the service-based model is just what profited, right? Nobody buys a massive rack and puts it into their garage and starts Facebook. Most people would just go to Google, spin up a project in GCP, and just go on with their life like everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and I feel like adding to that, I feel like the pattern which we often see where like people are essentially abstracting these services and telling, hey, we have this central single service that everybody is forced to use, usually doesn't work out. Instead of saying like, hey, we have these different service offerings people can build on, but don't have to. And then they can essentially think about like, hey, we have these different services. What is the best solution for our problem that we have? And I think this model works a lot better than this. Yeah, we have this solution everybody needs to use and needs to somehow force their problem on. So yeah, I fully agree with Thomas there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to do like a small bit of self-promotion, which is that I'm a member of the app delivery technical advisory group, and we wrote a platforms white paper. Wrote a white paper on like what we would recommend how to build platforms and what capabilities they should have. And one of the points was exactly that it's composable and it's completely free to the user what they want to choose, if they want to choose any of these like features that you provide, because as you say, it's not going to work forcing people to use something that they're not familiar with or they just don't want to because it doesn't fit their workflow. So, but then how do you, so if you have a centralized thing, then governance and compliance is kind of simple. It's just a matter of like, you know, forcing everyone. So how does governance and compliance factor into self-service infrastructure? Fabian, how about you start? If you understand the question, because you're looking a bit confused.
What do you mean with governance and compliance, like in that regard? Like,
so let's say you were, so for one thing, you know, limiting resource usage, for example, right? We were talking about, oh no, now my AWS bill is like millions because people have just been spinning up dev containers there. So that's one thing, but also compliance. For example, where do I store data? Can I use production data? This kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I think personally, like a good solution to that is essentially, obviously, like locking accounts down. So if you think about like how to share a Kubernetes cluster, essentially, and offering Kubernetes more or less as a service to your internal teams, how do you make sure people are not like spawning things they shouldn't spawn in there and kind of using up all the resources for other teams? Essentially, this boils down to limits and making sure certain things are not possible and like through policies prevented. So I think essentially it's good to give like teams as much freedom as possible so that they can essentially use as much features of Kubernetes, for example. They have like the highest permissions possible, essentially, without disturbing other teams within a single cluster, for example. But on the same page, there need to be restrictions in terms of limiting how much resources they can use, how much permissions they have to spawn pods. So for example, a privileged pod is usually not something you would allow it in a shared Kubernetes cluster, but you would want them to install like their own operators, for example, or they want their own applications that have like special permissions, then create their own namespaces. So it's always in the end some sort of trade-off, like how much freedom do you want to give to teams and how much compliance and governance you would want to enforce. And like the truth, as so often, lies somewhere in the middle. So you shouldn't give them like full access to AWS, Kubernetes, and so on, because like Engin said, things that can break will eventually break. But on the other side, if you restrict them to like only requesting and then getting like a single pod in like a namespace somewhere, and then you essentially kind of slow them down a lot, because they have to go through all these different hurdles essentially to do what they actually want to do. It's a trade-off in the end. But yeah, I personally like to have as much freedom as a developer to solve my problems as possible.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, the question about compliance and doing the right thing often boils down to education and to knowledge. Like with everything, and when you look at bigger enterprises, you always have got this phishing awareness training where they tell you don't open exe files from an email, right? And you usually know if there's an exe file in an email, it's going to be computer virus. And oftentimes you have to do something comparable for the resources that you offer to your users, to your team members. You have to tell them, look, if you spin up a EKS cluster on Amazon, it's going to cost this much. If you don't delete it, if you don't delete your DevPods and you have GPU instances, it's going to be very expensive. So you need to create this awareness and the knowledge of what you're dealing with, what you're doing. And then you can start doing other things. Like, let's go back to the enterprise example. If somebody opens an exe file on a computer and it starts leaking data or starts exfiltrating something, usually I've got an antivirus which analyzes or does meta-analysis on the computer, or does anomaly detection that suddenly a lot of data is going to Russia or China or some other state where a lot of hackers are, North Korea. The thing is, you oftentimes do not want to tell the user you're not allowed to open things in emails, because team members email themselves things. You basically want to be able to say, if you're on this platform and we detect that you have spun up 100 instances of GPU machines, but you haven't shut them down, you want to be able to enter into that account, shut them down, and tell the user, please watch out next time. But you don't want to take away their independence to do the things that they're supposed to do, because otherwise you're hand-holding them, and those things never scale. And
people just don't, they won't try things. They're just going to get, I remember I was consulting with a bank once, and obviously they have very strict rules on compliance. And the thing was, you got that, HP laptop that was like by default, there was no virtualization on it, which was great. But also, like, if you just needed like to download a file from, I think you couldn't even access Google Drive, but any file you would download would go through like a virus scanner thing, and it would take you like an hour to download it. And to the point where people would just not try any technology because it was just too much of a hassle. So in the end, you just get probably achieving the exact opposite of what you set out to do.
Yeah, that's exactly what Engin mentioned earlier when he was doing workshops and people just had GitHub locked down, which doesn't really make sense, because you just go there for resources to do your work, not to leak your company's data. So oftentimes those things backfire, even though there might be good intention behind it.
Absolutely. Downloading a package from npm is probably 10 times more dangerous than going to GitHub.
No, don't mention crates.io and Rust.
There's a command that's called like npm install all or everything or something, and it just literally installs every single npm package. I don't know who comes up with this. So yeah, JavaScript developers, yeah, they're a fun bunch. So we've been talking a lot about improving things for developers and everything, but I know that there's more and more people who are not developers as such, but still working with development tools. So a big group of that is like machine learning people, but also like product managers, everyone who has something to do with tech, who touches like the software developers build. So do you think that we need to see how we can create tooling that also works for non-developers?
Yeah, definitely. I think development and kind of essentially delivering software is often like two different pairs of things. And like there's preview environments, for example, which is like a very popular term, but I feel like this is also still a very big problem, and there's not a lot of environments that actually have like automated preview environments. And for example, for machine learning engineers, I often heard they like even share a repository together, or like a workspace, and they essentially share files and access. And I feel like still this is something where we need more tooling around, in a sense that it makes it easier for everybody to work on a project. So obviously developers have like their own requirements on how they need to work, how they need to test. And then there is non-engineering people that essentially want to get an insight on how the current status of a feature is, how the new feature works, how the new development version looks like. And I feel like in the end, it's not only about making it easy for developers, it's also about making it easy to test for non-technical people, or at least like make sure they can have a look at and test out what engineering did.
Thomas, you want to add something to that?
No, that was perfect.
You're like, I don't care about non-developers.
What? No, I totally do. I mean, the thing is, even if you just look at data science, that data scientists aren't necessarily engineers in the sense that they do C++ and program those entire libraries themselves, right? They use PyTorch or Keras, so they don't go deep into the code, but they think more on the meta level where they say, this is how I want my neural network to be. And then they just put it into a Jupyter notebook, and in the background, everything works. And I think Jupyter and like data science was like the first attempt of saying, look, you just get the nice website where you put your things in and everything runs in the background. And Jupyter notebooks and Jupyter Hub was like the first thing for data scientists, apart from maybe like RStudio and other solutions, where you just do your thing almost in line. And at the end of the day, something comes out that you can use somewhere else. So those people didn't necessarily have to think about operations. When you train a neural network, you don't think how you're going to deploy that thing. You think about your specific task, which is, how do I train it so that the results are good? How can I massage the data that the output is going to be the thing that I want? So the tool that they have at hand isn't necessarily something to build a finished product, but to achieve their task. And I think that's something that tooling should be in general, and what DevPod is doing really great is because it's providing with the tool that you need, but not the entire thing, right? It's not going to dictate you how you're supposed to do things. It's going to provide you with tools. If you like Golang, you can use Golang. If you like VS Code to program in Go, you can use VS Code. Your development environment will still be the same. You will have the same CLI tools installed and everything else, but it doesn't force you to one particular thing, but it tells you, look, if you want to do Jupyter notebooks, which are in alpha or beta right now, by the way, you can use Jupyter notebooks, right? Instead of having to do it in something else. So it's giving you the same environment, the same access to data, but provides you with different tools that you can just plug and play and switch out without having to change your entire workflow, without having to relearn things, without having to set them up, without having to change your Docker files or anything else that you have. So it's just making it more accessible to different parties. Because let's say you have one dev container, you work with PyCharm, somebody else goes in with Jupyter, checks out your model, leaves it again. And you have the same thing. It didn't change a single thing about it.
Yeah, like now that we're talking about this, I'm thinking, just going back to the beginning of what we were talking about when we said DevOps was mainly for ops people, or like to help them. But then we try to make ops people into developers as well. By, the stuff like Pulumi or CDK, or, like where we're saying, okay, now how about you program your, what you would do declaratively maybe, or like what you would write Puppet scripts, or like, I don't even remember, it's so long ago. But do you feel like there's a parallel now that we're like kind of also trying to get machine learning people to program, or is it more that we're saying, as you said, probably that's what you mean, that you know what, everyone should just do whatever they do best, and we'll just give you a tool that can kind of like help you with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with machine learning and AI, the workflow is a lot different. Like Thomas said, it's not, you have different requirements essentially during engineering because you're dealing with a lot of data. The data needs to lie somewhere. And you need to access that data. You need special hardware to do things. You need to be able to still share, and you often don't have like a huge engineering background. You have like a scripting background maybe. So this is, in my opinion, a completely new role that even kind of breaks out of this typical development and ops pattern, because yeah, ops is really, they are also scripting, but they are like working on maintaining something should still run, something should be deployed. It's not so much for them about actually building new things. They are like more concerned about running, executing, deploying things. I think developers, they are mostly like really, with Git, for example, Git is like very good for a regular developer, but for like an AI person, it's not a good fit because AI has big files and it's really hard to version it. So this makes it often difficult to use. So I think what will happen eventually is that there will be new tooling, which you already see, like Jupyter Notebooks, RStudio, and so on, new services around this that essentially builds on existing things in some way, but it will be a new way how they will work on their projects. And yeah, I feel like this is something new that's coming now up, which is also pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to also see how we're gonna do DevPod with quantum computing, because that's gonna be really interesting. I have no idea when that's coming, but I know that I think on IBM there was a long time that you could already use quantum bits and stuff. So it's really, I agree, it's really exciting. And I'm guessing we're gonna move like machine learning and development also much closer. Like let's GitHub Copilot
I'm not hoping
now.
quantum computing is coming too soon, because if that really breaks encryption, we will have, as an engineer, a bigger time refactoring and updating all the dependencies. Then
I'm guessing you have to encrypt in like some quantum way then.
Yeah, but
maybe.
Yeah.
But okay, this is like going way too far, and I don't know anything about it really. Thomas, do you know anything about quantum computing that you can add to this conversation?
Oh God, really? Yeah, sure. So I mean, there are already algorithms implemented by universities, or theoretical algorithms, where they say this is going to be quantum resistant because they have mathematical proofs and what's not. But I mean, when quantum computer comes, it's basically the Y2K bug, but it actually happened. Where you will have to just fix everything, you will stop doing everything that you do, and you will just have to change encryption everywhere because it's going to be broken. So it's going to be even worse than Heartbleed, where you got access to all the credentials, because now you'll be able to access all the servers. And now going back, that's why it's important to do platform and education, because you have to tell people there's going to potentially be one day where somebody can just SSH into your machine, even though you'd never leaked the key. Right. So you basically have to say, look, you need to make it secure. You shouldn't open a lot of ports. You should use egress-only connection or WireGuard VPN or some tunneling services that protect you against this direct connection or this direct line of attacks. And you get this advantage from both a technological point of view as well as from a security point of view, because you have new things, you have new knowledge, and you just get to go back and focus on your work, improving it. It's like with software engineering. If you know what SQL injection is, you're not going to have an SQL injection exploit built into your code because you know how it works. But if you don't, you probably will make one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. All right. I think, so we're supposed to do like a Q&A with the panel now. I don't see any question at the moment, but there are some people here on with us in the meetup who I'm going to ask if they have any questions. I don't even know if they're still here because they have their cameras off, but I'll give them some time. So yeah, I just want to just ask before, like, could you imagine putting some AI into like DevPod or something? Like, I don't know what exactly, because I'm just thinking like, oh, like these are two technologies that need to like be smashed together for some way. But do you see any kind of interesting use case for that?
I think eventually, probably. I mean, we see now all these different services evolving, and as much as they are useful for other areas, I think for development, this is also very useful. Because if you look at the way how a developer currently works, where like on the one side you have the IDE, on the other side you have Google open, always ready to answer your question. I think the natural successor is to have some sort of companion that is able to kind of take over these repetitive and like smaller tasks you have as a developer. I don't believe that a developer itself will be replaced eventually, but yeah, I really think it's a lot easier to have some sort of companion that helps you developing essentially. And yeah, I think in DevPod we'll definitely either through the IDE, so it could be that it's already integrated in the IDE. Could be also that we do something during the deployment, during the connection. Maybe there's some general AI you will integrate into all these different IDEs. I don't know yet, but I'm pretty excited for what's coming there. And I would never say we won't do that. The question is more, I guess, when we will do it. So yeah.
There's KHJPT.
We're going to go full circle and pull off a Microsoft and include Clippy into DevPod.
Yeah, it looks like you want to spin up a dev container. Can I help you with that? But there is, for example, this project called K8GPT, which I think is just like a kind of smart manager. Like it will scan your Kubernetes cluster and inform you of things that are going wrong. So this is like very useful for, it's not going to replace an Kubernetes administrator or something like that, but at least they don't have to go in and look at every single log and, so for sure, it's the same with GitHub Copilot. I am glad that I don't have to look up the signature of everything all the time. But then sometimes it lies to me. Sometimes like, that's not the signature.
Yeah, that happens more often. But I think that's a good point that you just mentioned, that it checks every single log line. Because up until now, anomaly detection is still complicated, because you need to find outliers, you need to sample data and what's not. Now, if you've got a transformer like ChatGPT or GPT-4 or whatever exists out there, that thing can do anomaly detection much easier without you having to have a background in it. So you can suddenly say, hey, analyze those 100 log lines, tell me which one is an anomaly. It's going to tell you those two crash loop backoffs thingies don't work. And then it just sees the error message, and based on data that it saw, it can tell you, look, the image doesn't exist in the registry. And that's much easier than you having to go through hundreds of clusters and implement some logic where you fetch events from Kubernetes, where you parse them, where you check for an error field. You have to have it stored in Loki or Elasticsearch or Kafka or God knows what. It's just much simpler because it connects, checks, and if it has something, it alerts you immediately. So it just goes into a completely different direction where it makes those complicated things much more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably just be concerned that it's going to replace DevRel, because I could see like AI writing a talk like, this is lessons learned from fixing 1 million Kubernetes clusters.
Yes.
It's true.
This is lessons learned from having ChatGPT fix my cluster, written by ChatGPT.
Oh, cool. We're at the end of the time, but do any of you two, Fabian and Thomas, do you have anything that you wanted to add as an end to this conversation? Any like last words of wisdom?
I don't know. I really liked the meetup today, and even though I'm a little bit sad it didn't happen in Frankfurt, I'm pretty glad that we did it virtually. Also, again, shout out to Engin. I'm still in awe, like how cool all the stuff that he's doing is. Also I thought this was a pretty interesting conversation, nice panel. And yeah, with that, I got not new input, what we can do, what will come with Loft and all our projects. So yeah, thanks for joining and thanks for doing that.
Thomas, anything to add?
Yeah, stay fresh.
Okay, I will do my best. And Thomas is the only one who's in Frankfurt, so he's you're obviously the only one who's wearing a DevPod shirt, I think. I know you're the only one who made an effort. Yeah, thanks so much to both of you and to Engin, and especially also to Ashish, who had to like scramble to move everything online last minute. Thank you so much for all your hard work. This was a really great meetup. I agree, the conversation was really fun and informative, and yeah, we definitely need to do this again in person when we can.
Yeah, I have something to add. Thank you everyone for the great panel, Lian, Thomas, and Fabian. Thank you so much, Engin, for doing this virtually also. And we have to cancel our in-person event because of some logistical issue, but I think we will be back pretty soon in person in Frankfurt. And yeah, we will see you soon. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you. All right, everyone, have a great day, and don't forget to drink some beer and eat some pizza at home.
Yeah.
All right.